Welcome back to the next video in our building your own version of Uber series. Now in the last couple of videos we've set up the UI and UX and we've also set up the database. So now what we're going to do is begin to get into the workflows, and the first part of that, funnily enough, is actually looking at the APIs and integrations. We're using an API for Google Maps, so I'll show you how you can set that up, get your own API key and make it work. We're also going to use Integromat here to get direction and essential information on how long it's going to take to get from one address to the other, here from Integromat via the Google Maps API. And we're also going to use Stripe to take a payment. Now we won't fully set up all of these features in this video, but what I will do is show you how they all work, make sure that your APIs are ready to go, and that means in the video following this we can quickly run through and just tidy up all of our workflows. But what we will be using in this video is Adalo's custom actions in combination with Integromat. So there's quite a little bit to cover. Let's get stuck in. Now the first place that we're going to start here is Google Maps, and you might not know it, but Google Maps is actually an API. You've probably used Google Maps hundreds of times. You've probably seen it all over the internet. But every single website, every single app that uses Google Maps is actually making an API call. They're sending a request to Google. They're saying, please show me a map that looks like, it's centered on St. Louis here, and it's got a marker, and it's, your roads are yellow, whatever. Essentially, this is all just an API call that you make to Google. And so what you have to do, of course, is have an API key from Google. And we'll go grab that in a second. But to talk you through how this component works, you can choose between having a single marker or multiple markers. And then for your markers, you've got to put in an address. If it's a single marker, you can either use a static one or grab it from magic text. For example, if you wanted the user's home street address. Similarly though, if you have multiple markers, then what you actually need is a collection. So it will work exactly like a list element in the same way that, if I come in here, I can pick a collection and it's going to look like this. You'll notice that looks incredibly similar to if I went down to this list here and look at all the options. So it essentially works just like a list of markers. And so that's great, but it does mean that we're going to need at some point a database collection that can handle multiple addresses, and we'll address that in the next video. Pun perhaps intended. So in terms of getting started, the first thing that we need to do is grab our API key. Now I've already got mine handy. I'm just going to Command and V or Control and V, paste that in. Again, I always say in every video, do not let anybody see your API key for anything, because they can then access it themselves. They might run up your bill, they might mess with your data, whatever. Do not ever show it. This is the same API key I used in the building something like Airbnb video. I'm just reusing it for now for these videos, and then I'm going to refresh it when I finish this Uber one, which is why I'm breaking my own rule and showing it, although I have some other API keys to use for Stripe that I will not be showing. However, in terms of getting your own API key, simply click here, which will show on your tool as well, and Adalo will show you this guide. And essentially what you do is you've got to follow the steps that Google have outlined. So you go here and essentially you just basically sign up for a Google Cloud Platform account, you log in, and there's a big button that says Get API Key, and you hit that, and of course it gives you your API key. It's really, really simple. Even if the interface seems daunting and you don't really know what Google Cloud Platform is, don't worry about it. It will take you 2 seconds to do. Similarly, you then have to click each of these links and it will take you to a little page with an enable button. Please absolutely make sure you do this. If you do not, it will not work. So you always have to hit this enable button, and that will get you enabled. One thing to bear in mind here, Google basically gives you $300 of free credit every single month, which should make this API effectively free. If you are using this API to the extent we need to pay for it, and that means you've got like 100,000 users, it's very, very cheap anyway. It probably won't cost you that much. I imagine like if you've got 100,000 users, you're probably spending about £100 a month. Not a huge amount of money there. Obviously do your own kind of research on that, but at this stage, if you're just building out an app, I really, really cannot stress enough that I would not worry about it at this stage. There's lots of other map solutions as well you can switch to if you really need to, so please don't worry about that. Adalo then has a guide that talks through how the map works, but I'm going to do that for you. So one other thing just to keep in mind, essentially what you're doing here, if you look at these URLs, you've got like Maps backend, you've got geocoding backend, Maps iOS backend. These are different services related to the API or different APIs that you're turning on for Adalo to use. Pay attention to this because you're going to have to do the same thing for Integromat as well. And I find, the process you use here is the same one as over here. So it just might help you out a little bit as well. So if I jump back to my Uber clone then, we've got our API key in, which means this map is now going to show up. I can go to my markers. I can put in here, we always want to show the user's home address here. Indeed, this could be the current address of the user. As we know, Adalo doesn't support GPS, so it's kind of hard to show the absolute current location. Although I think you can do it down here, kind of thing. It'll probably work better on the phone. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but we're going to manage the user's location themselves. Now you could use, if you wanted to basically update the user to be wherever they were last dropped off, you could also use the current, but I find the home address is a good place to start. And then, when they come to this location search box, they can of course just put their own address detail in if they want to go somewhere else or if they are somewhere else, So with that in mind, let's hit preview. Now I've already went and created an account in between the videos, and I've set the address as 15 Savile Row, and if you're familiar with London, you'll know that's where it's showing up. So if I scroll right down, I don't know if it'll show the names yet. Well, Savile Row, there you go, you can kind of make that out, Savile Row, and I'm on number 15, so it's showing my address, no problem at all. So and if you remember, by the way, we also made our own version of the map, which is why we've got these green roads. So I've pasted the custom code I got in there from mapstyle.withgoogle.com, and I obviously just set up the map in here, and I can use whatever style I like, just in case you forgot that part. That's why the map looks like that, but looks like this on the app builder. So now that we've got that sorted out, we've essentially just sorted our map. We can take our API key, so I've just hit Command and C to copy that, or Control and C, and you'll see, I was going to say you could paste it in here, but it looks like Adalo's already done that for us. So each of these maps now has the API key. Now they're not all set up, but they are, for all intents and purposes, ready to go. And so the next place that we're going to look at is Stripe. Now, if you've seen me do this in other videos, then you'll know that what I'm going to ask you to do here is hit connect with Stripe on your own terms. Depending on whether or not you've already got a Stripe account or not, then it's going to take you to various different pages. I am not going to show mine because it does involve entering your password, doing a verification, etc. So it takes a couple of minutes. It's really, really easy, but it does show some secure information. But what we're going to do is we're going to connect with Stripe. That'll let us take a payment. We're also going to use test mode down here. So when you enable test mode, Stripe will ask you for a publishable key and a secret key. Because once you've got that, you can come into testing here and you can use these fake credit card numbers just to essentially test out various different payments. Now, if you follow through Connect with Stripe, it's pretty easy to find what I'm talking about. I'm not going to show you because it would involve showing you my own Stripe account, but down the bottom left hand corner of the main Stripe menu, which you'll see when you're logged in, there's a little section that says view test data, and when you switch that on, you'll be able to find your publishable key and your secret key. So I'm going to pause the video, I'm going to go and connect mine. You should go and connect yours as well, and I'll meet you back here in 2 seconds. Alright, we are back, and I've now connected my Stripe account. So if I click off there and back on, it usually shows up and says Stripe Connect is active, and I can now put in whatever I need to put in to get the whole thing working. I can put in a payment amount, charge description, email field, etc. I have enabled my test mode. I'm not going to click it because that would involve showing you my API keys, but this is now enabled. I've put my publishable key in there, and I've also put my secret key in there, and that means when I eventually put a charge through here, which we'll do in the next video, it should work. And again, remember, if you are finished testing your app, you want to put it live, please turn off test mode, otherwise you won't actually be able to take real payments, so always bear that in mind. But at this point, you've got Stripe set up, you've got Google Maps set up. The last thing to do now is start to set up Integromat and create a custom action. So what we're going to do is have a little bit of a look at the workflow when you get onto this page here. So essentially what's happening is the user is going to click the where to button. That's going to bring them to the location search page. And there's a few things we want to happen here. We want the home address to be set here, and we can actually do that by default, which I'll show you in a wee second. And we also want to know where they're going. And once I've got that information, we can send that over to Integromat. We can run a workflow outside of Adalo to grab that direction information, and then we can start to plot a ride based on that. So what we're going to do is at the top of location search, I'm just going to go to actions. I'm going to do a quick change here, which is I'm going to go to more and I'm going to hit change input value, and I'm going to select the input value, which is the current address input, which is the top one. And all I want to do here is say for the logged in user, put in their home street address. So that's going to be my default. By default, the home street address will show up there, and then the user will be able to type in here. I could also set up this kind of history here. Essentially what I'm going to say is this is a list of rides where we'll filter that just to say this is a list of rides where the ride is already complete. So this is a historic list. We want the user to be able to essentially set their address based on previous places they've been. So we can just put in a drop-off street address there. And again, instead of the subtitle, similar to what we did in the profile, I'm just going to put the date in there as well. And I'll just recalculate that to there, date, there we go. And that's kind of all we need. What we'll simply do then is set a little action that says when the user clicks anything in this history, change input value. We're going to change the to address, and we're going to set that as the drop-off street address for the current ride. So what we're saying is, for any ride the user's completed before, the history will now show up here. And the to address input will, if they click it, the to address input will be filled with the current ride's drop-off. The other thing you could do to kind of mimic how Uber actually works is you could add another filter that says drop-off street address is equal to then the form inputs and the to address input. And what that means is, as the user types into the to address input, this little kind of list of history there will start to kind of narrow down to only the places that match what the user's typed in. So if they type in 15, it will only show places that started with a 15. I'll take that out for now, but that is an option that you can include. And so we've got at this point in the user's flow, we're going to have their current address, where they are at the minute. We're going to get their to address, and then we're going to have a button to continue. And the first thing that I'm going to do there is create a new ride. So we want to create a ride, we want to set a unique ID. I could call that something like ride, call that ride username. And all I'm trying to do here is create a unique list, or a unique kind of piece of data that will never be replicated again. I need to create a unique identifier for this. And so if I say ride username, if I set the current time and go with no formatting, that is never going to be replicated again, because that, if you look at that no formatting, the date is literally right down to like the last nanosecond, and therefore even if I was to quickly quit out this and quickly create a new ride, it's just going to show with a different time. So that's creating a unique ID. I think Adalo have actually now added a component in their marketplace which can generate unique IDs, so you might be better using that, but I quite like my method and I'm going to stick to it. So we now know that, we know the pickup street address, so we can set that, and we can say the form inputs as a current input. Again, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to build this to use the user's home details. I just want to make this kind of city-wide, and so I'm just going to put the home city and home country in here. Similarly, when I do the to address input, I'm going to put the city, etc. In here as well from the home city. You could do this differently. You could either ask the user to specify a country, you could try and take that information out of the input by sending it to Integromat and doing what we call parsing it, so you could figure out what's a city, etc. You could also only save the ride detail based on what Integromat sends back from Google Maps Directions API. So there's a lot of different ways, depending if you're trying to go global city or not. There are lots of different ways. What have I done there? User, city, country. There are lots of different ways that you can make this work. And so therefore, you know, don't worry too much about I guess the exact way you configure this. You can change it later, you can play around with it, and if you do need some more tips, come and ask us in the community. But anyway, in terms of next things here, one thing just to bear in mind, so as driver assigned, we want to set to false at the minute. We want to set all of these values to false because at the minute they are all false. By default, a true false value is actually empty. It's not true or false, it's null. If you haven't heard null before, go check out our data types video where I've talked about this a lot on the No Code Fundamentals series. But essentially, the problem is because it's null by default, if you don't remember to set these as false when you create the ride, any checks that you do later on to see, for example, is the driver assigned yes or no, well, you won't get a yes or no, you'll just get an empty or we don't know. And therefore you've got to make sure you set these as false when you create this. Little tip just to bear in mind. Everything else we can leave empty for now because this information around estimated pickup time, estimated drop off time, pickup time in seconds, etc. we are now going to go and get from Integromat. So let me show you how this works. We're going to hit add another action and we're going to do custom action. Now I've already done this before. Every custom action you do on Adalo on any app gets saved across all of your Adalo apps. Not 100% sure why that happens. I think it is getting changed soon actually, but it is handy if you want to reuse the same stuff. So I'm going to hit new custom action so I can create this from scratch, and I'm going to do, I'll just call this one grab distance data just to distinguish it from the one I've got before. You'll be able to select a type. Doesn't hugely matter on this request what you're going to use that for, so I'm just going to hit update because I'm planning to update the ride with the information I get back here. And when I click next, it's going to ask me for the API base URL, the method, etc. Now, this should be familiar to you. If it's not, it's probably because you haven't watched the API and integrations pillar videos on the No Code Fundamentals, and so please go check that out. Otherwise, you're not going to have a clue what's going on here, although I will try and kind of describe it as I go along. But essentially what we now need is the API base URL. We need the, what we're going to send to that URL, and then what information we're going to send along there as well. Now, in terms of what we want to do, let's jump onto Integromat. Now, I'll leave it up to you to create your own Integromat account. It's a pretty simple process, and if you check our perks section, we might even have a discount for them. But when I come into my dashboard, or if I come into my scenarios, I can hit create a new scenario. And what we want to do here is set up a webhook, and that webhook is going to listen for an API call coming from Adalo. When it gets the API call, it's going to expect that we've sent over address information. It's going to use that address information to go to the Google Maps API, and then it's going to send that information back. Now you might be wondering, why am I using Integromat for this? Could I not just call the API directly? And the answer is I could, but that's a lot more complicated. That's going to take a lot longer, and it's a little bit more technical. By using Integromat here, actually I can kind of skip that, and I can just say, well, I want to use, for example, I can just type in here the Google Maps API itself, and that's just going to save me a lot of time instead of messing around with Google's API. So I'm going to pick that. The other thing, I don't know if I need to type it in here, but the other thing I need is webhooks. So you need Google Maps, you need webhooks. Do not click WP webhooks, you don't need that. That's for, I think, WordPress. So pick Google Maps, pick webhooks, and then you can hit continue. And that's going to bring you to this screen here. And so we're going to start by clicking webhooks. And at any time, by the way, if you miss that little screen, you can find them down here. You can find everything you added in, and you can also hit add if you want to add in another integration here. But we'll click webhooks, and we want to go for the first option, which is triggers when a webhook receives data. In other words, a custom webhook waits to get an API call. Now I've already set up this Adalo hook, but I'm going to do a fresh one just to show you how it works. So if I hit add, sorry, I need to edit that slightly. Can I not add on top of that? I'll tell you what we'll do, I'll redetermine it. So when you come in, you'll be able to hit add, and you'll be able to create your own webhook there. And I think you can also create multiple, probably by hitting kind of edit item and messing around with that. Let me click off there. But you should be able to add multiple webhooks. And what's going to happen is when you add your own, I've got mine called my Adalo webhook. it's going to come up here with this URL, so hook.integromat.com, and then you'll have a random kind of collection of numbers and letters depending on what you're looking for. So I'm going to hit copy address to clipboard, and then I'm going to hit redetermine data structure. And what it's going to say is Integromat is now listening for the data and will determine the data structure from the incoming data automatically. What it basically means is whatever API call, whatever data I send to Integromat, Integromat is going to interpret that as the data that I want to use for this overall workflow or scenario, and then it's going to go and run with it from there. So before I send that API call, let's start dragging in Google Maps, because I want to just make sure I know what data I need to send. So when I click Google Maps down the bottom here, I've got all these different options. It's really, really cool. You can get directions, you can get a specific location, a time zone, you can even find out how high something is from the, like how high is it off sea height, for example. And as it mentions here, you can even find out the ocean floor depth. Maybe you can build an app for Uber for submarines. But lots of different stuff I can do here. The one that I'm going to pick though is get a distance matrix. I think that's the one I want. In fact, you could probably just use the get directions actually. Keep it a little bit simpler. So if I hit get directions, if I double click that, now I've already connected Google Maps connection. Again, you can hit add, you can go in there and you can just put your API key and that will give you the connection as well. It's really, really simple. And essentially it's going to ask for an origin and it's going to ask for a destination. What it means by origin is the address. So you could write London, you could write 15 Savile Row, London, you could write 15 Savile Row, London, United Kingdom. And then you need the same for the destination. So we're going to have to send the from address and the to address, the pickup address, the destination address. There's a few other things we can specify in here, but none of them are particularly interesting. And so what we'll do then, we know Integromat is listening, so let's try and send a call. So if we come back to Adalo, I can immediately put my nice little API base URL in here. In terms of the method, I'm just going to make it a get method. We don't need anything more kind of complicated than that. You could make it a post, you could mess around with it. If you're comfortable doing that, crack on. If not, just follow what I'm doing. Now on the right hand side, I need to choose which inputs are available here. And what this is going to do is, if I create an input here, it will be available to set by the API, but Adalo actions will also be able to put data in there. So in other words, if I want to use magic text or variables to pull data in here from Adalo, then I need to add some inputs. And clearly the ones I want to pull in are the from street address, the from city, the from country, and the to street address, etc. that I've just taken from my location input screen. So let me show you, and it'll probably make a little bit more sense. So I can pick number, date, time, or text. I'm going to hit text, of course. And I'm going to call this one, we'll call this pickup, you can call this pickup street address. And I need to give it an example value, so I'll just put 15 Savile Row as per, or you could even just put, I don't know, 640 Lane or something, but put 15 Savile Row. I also need the pickup city, and the reason, by the way, that we're doing an example value is just for Adalo to be able to figure out how the API call should work. Obviously in practice we'll actually use our magic text and we'll be able to do that, and I'll show you how in just a second. It'll make a little bit more sense when you see the previous screen. I'm going to hit pick up country, and of course an example will be United Kingdom. Now those are the values I'm actually going to use as well, but that's okay. And then in terms of add item, all I'm going to put in here, again, I'm only building this at the city level, so I'm only letting people really travel between London on my app. So all I'm going to do is call this a destination, or a drop off, I'll call it destination street address. So where did it go into the pickup and the destination? And of course that could be 28 Banner Street, which for some reason again is just a random one that I've picked to keep doing. The reason I've not put in the destination city and country is because I'm restricted to just my city, and so I'm just going to use the same one over on Integromat. And so what I can do here is, now that I've added my inputs, I can now start to make sure this is going to get sent over to Integromat. So I can set this as a query parameter. Again, you'll be probably familiar with these if you've watched the making a request videos in the API and integrations pillar. But what we're going to do is we're going to give this a name, and I'm really just going to copy over the input name. So I'm going to call this I'll call this from address actually. I'll just do it a little bit different to show you how this works. So I can call it from street address. The value then, if I hit the magic text, is going to be the pickup street address. So you can see how that's starting to work. So call that from street address. Add another parameter. We'll call that the from city. So where are you going from? Where are you going to? Again, give that pickup city. You could use the same words, I'm just trying to show you the differentiation. From country, of course, and again, is out of the country. And finally, query parameter, we'll call this the to address. Oops, address. And match that up. So that's kind of all we need. We can really just ignore the body. And so we've got this button that says run test request. So let's just pop back to Integromat. Yep, looks like it's still listening. Watch this. So when I hit run test request, it'll say test successful. And if I hit show full response, it'll show me this word accepted. That's Integromat's way of telling me that the API call worked. Now nothing happens just yet on this side, but if we pop back to Integromat, it now says successfully determined. And so what can happen is, if I make sure, now these are connected, but if I click here into Google Maps, I now have all this data here, look. So under this little star, I've got all these variables that are coming from that webhook that are now available to me in Google Maps. So I can now put from street address, I can press a space, I can hit from city, press space again, hit from country, and I've just calculated my origin here in Integromat. So we've just sent that data from Adalo right over here to Integromat. Similarly, for my destination, I can just put the to address, I can hit space, I can put it from city, hit space, put it from country, because again, we're only working in the same city. I can then specify various options here. You know, if you wanted to do something for calculating like cycling, etc., you can do all that. You can add waypoints if you want. That's a little bit too complicated for me at the minute, but you know, you can add in like, you know, go from this destination to that destination, but stop at this waypoint, that waypoint, etc. And of course, you can specify things like avoid ferries and that kind of thing. Some of that would probably be pretty useful for you if you're building a taxi app. For the units, you can pick kilometres or metres. I'm in Britain, so I'm going to pick miles. And then define time. So this is an interesting one. Essentially what the define time will let you do is, if you just make a call to Google Maps right now to ask directions, it's going to tell you, well, that looks, based on distance alone, that looks like it should take 20 minutes. However, if you're ordering a taxi at 5 PM rush hour, then you kind of need to know how long is it going to take in traffic, so that instead of 20 minutes, it might now be 30 minutes. And so you can define the time that this directions should be figured out from. So if I say the departure time and date, what I can actually do is type now, and oops, maybe I can't. Maybe if I go here, sorry, on the right and hit now, it'll come in. There we go. So that will just tell Google whenever this goes through, whenever this API call is actually made, whatever the time is right this second, calculate the departure time and date from this time. So basically, figure out how long it's going to take from right now. You can also set the arrival time. That's not really relevant for us, but if you wanted to say, give me the directions and tell me when I should leave based on me wanting to get to a destination by 5 PM, for example, then you could do that. Where that might be useful for you is if you wanted to build out the ability to schedule a taxi in advance. So if you want to be able to say, right, schedule a taxi to come tomorrow at 4 in the morning and take me to the airport, then you could put arrival time in there, 4 AM, and then have it calculate the best time for the taxi to come and get you. So we're not going to do that, but again, it just gives you an idea of how deep you can go in building out this no-code functionality. But that looks like our API call is ready to go. And so that'll start pulling the data through. As you'll probably remember, every API call that gets made is a request, which we've just captured on the left here, and then there is a response. So I can either hit add module, go to webhooks, and I can create a webhook response. So what that's saying is, at the minute, Integromat just came back with this little default response of accepted. That's not going to tell us very much. If we want to send back all the address information we're calculating, then we're going to have to do it in a slightly more structured, clever way. We're going to do that by making a webhook response. Now, a word of warning, we have to write some JSON in here. Hopefully you've watched a video that I did before on writing JSON. If you're interested in really understanding what I'm about to do, then absolutely watch that video first. It's under our APIs and integrations pillar as well, and it will talk you through what this looks like. JSON is essentially the language in some ways, or the way of speaking that the APIs use to talk to each other. It's a little bit like it's not quite a programming language, it's what we call a markup language, and it's sort of the equivalent of you know, it's almost like learning an accent of English, you know. Perhaps a poor way to describe it, but that's kind of what it's like. So I'm going to write that out, and I've got all these variables. If you can see over here, I've got all these different variables that are now coming from Google Maps. So I can get a departure time, and I can get the value of that. I can get the arrival time, and if you remember key value pairs that we talked about in the data types video. Well, everything I'm getting here, although it's kind of hard to make out, is actually just a key value pair. So for the departure time, I've got the key, which is the text, and or I suppose departure time itself is a key, and then I've got the value, and that's going to give me the departure time as a value. So what I'm going to do here is start writing some JSON to get the things that we need. I'm going to do my curly brackets, so I've just done that, and let's put a little bit of space in between them. And I'm going to write, first of all, we'll do arrival time. Now, if you're wondering why have I put the quotes in there, etc., it's probably because you're not familiar with JSON. If you are, you'll kind of understand what I've done here. And again, this is where you can either decide to go watch that video to understand what I'm doing, or you can just wait till I've done this and then just copy it out, you know, exact character for character, and it will work. So I can also do departure time, and I'll just put value in there as well. I can do the distance. Now, I think I've done something wrong here. I'm just going to double check. I forget now exactly how Integromat handles these variables here. I forget if I've got it. I think I've got to just stick them in. I'll maybe leave it actually, because most of them are numbers. I'll come back to that. I'll double check it against the one that I've done before. But what else? We've got duration. And by the way, the little text variable that you've got available there, essentially what that does is it will let you sort of, you know, if I do duration, it's going to give me a number, which is like, well, that's how many seconds or minutes it takes. But if I do the text, it will say the duration is about 10 minutes sort of thing. So it's pretty interesting. Having a look up and down here, again, there's other things you could use if you really wanted to, like traffic speed and all that kind of thing. But you know, personally, I don't want to use them. So this is going to be my JSON. So if I go back and let's just double check that against the previous scenario that I made, we'll make sure it looks right, because it might not be. Oops, I need to hit the little, always hit the little save button down here. So if I pop back here, we'll go to my original one, which I think is this one here. Yes, it is. And just take a double look at that JSON where I did it before. So this is one where I've done it before, and you can see all the various kind of information that I've got here. Yep, I just wanted to check if I needed to put those quotes in. It looks like I do. I can never remember if Integromat does that for you. So I've got distance, arrival time, departure time, and duration. So we just go back, correct our original little scenario. Don't worry, we're nearly at the finish line here. Just come back in here, distance, yada yada yada, and I'm just going to add a quick little set of air quotes around all of this. Nice and easy. There we go. So, what should happen now is if we send our data to this, and we should get data back. Now, almost always when you make an API call, something's going to go wrong. So, you know, something might go wrong here, but let's try it. Now, if you want to switch this on, you simply got to hit this from, you know, off to on, click this switch here. But the other thing you can do is hit run once, and Integromat will basically start waiting for an API call to come through. So what I can do here on Adalo is don't hit save custom action, hit back. So bring me back to the same page, and now hit run test request again. And while we're waiting, that's now ran through Integromat there, so you'll see it all says, you know, big happy ticks. And what we've got back is the distance, and we've also had the duration. So I've had if I look at my full response there, I've had a fair bit of that information come back. Now, it's missing a couple of little bits and pieces around about arrival time and departure time. but we don't really need them just yet. We need our distance, so that's going to be our distance. I think that's probably in feet. And we also need our duration, and that is in, I believe, in seconds. Because if I take 1162 and I times that, divide that by 60, as in 60 seconds in a minute, that should give me roughly, I would imagine, around about 20 to 21 minutes, which is what I would expect the distance to be. And so there we go. Essentially what's happened is if I click that, it will show me all the information it got through. So this actually shows the real API call that was made. It tells you the input, so this is everything it's sent, and it also shows you the output as well. So you've got the duration, you've got the distance. I know you can see what I was talking about with those variables. You know, the value is just going to give me, for example, is in miles of 4792. I'm not sure what the derivative of miles must be, but you know, that'll be feet or something like that. But the text is 2.9 miles. Similarly, there you go. I said 20 minutes. It looks like it's 19 minutes. So 1,162 seconds works out as 19 minutes. You can see things like duration and traffic, etc. I'm not going to worry too much about that for this particular build, but you do have it in there. And then there's various different things. I'm not sure why this happens. I've noticed this a couple of times, but when I made this call once before, arrival time, departure time, etc. didn't show up. For some reason, when I just went like this and hit back and then ran it again, for some reason it did work. I don't know why. I don't know exactly what's going on there. I've ended up kind of not making sort of full use of it. You can switch it out for the distance matrix API. For example, which will give you back some kind of more accurate information. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure what causes that to happen. If I do find the issue, I will try and put it in the description just to kind of specify. But ultimately, you can see here on the previous one, you know, it is ultimately returning arrival time, departure time, all that kind of thing. So not 100% sure what's causing that. I will investigate it a little bit and mention it down below. But now that we've got the vast majority of what we need, let's pop back here. We can see that we've now got these magic outputs, and both of these are numbers, so they're set as text fields. I'm just going to change that to number fields, which means we can use them in formulas. We've got our duration as well. I'm going to change that to a number. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can start to do with this, because when I hit save custom action, you'll now see how this looks. So here's the action. I can put in the street address, I can put in the pickup city, I can put in the pickup country, and then when I go to my next stage, if I add another action and go to my next stage, and let's say I want to update, you know, the new ride, then I can start to pull data from that grab distance. I can access distance and duration, and that is how we're going to start to make use of the custom action we've just built. So let's wrap up there. We've just set up Google Maps, we've set up Stripe, we've just set up Integromat and made a custom action to pull data through. In the next video, we'll then start using that custom action to actually use these calculations, start to display estimated pickup time, estimated drop-off time, and really just complete this full workflow and bring the app together. So jump in the next video and we'll go and do that.